Holy City Center Radio, it is episode 211, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Monday, January 15th, 2024. Hope your Monday is not too manic and you're having a good start to your week. Hope your weekend was fantastic as well. Quiet around these parts again, just doing some work, watching, the NFL playoffs, watching some college basketball. Not a whole lot of fun and interesting things to report back on, but things are going well here, and I hope you all are doing well as well. That was a lot of wells, 2 in a row. In any event, I will say that as it relates to Charleston, one thing I have been doing besides, watching Southern Charm, is it's in its 9th season now, and they just had the reunion episode, so I'm up to date on that. But I also was like, you know what? I should finally watch that first season of Southern Hospitality, which is a spin-off series from Southern Charm that Leva Bonaparte, she's on Southern Charm. Her and her husband, Lamar, own several businesses, specifically on King Street, actually, including Republic. And the show is based mostly on that business and their employees there and the drama behind the scenes and all that kind of stuff. So I hadn't seen the first season yet. Just didn't. I just didn't do it for whatever reason. So I have started it. I'm a couple episodes in. It's what you would expect it to be. I mean, it's reality TV, So if you're into that stuff and if you like Southern Charm, you'll certainly be into this show. And if you do not like reality TV or Southern Charm, then you're probably not going to like this one either. But it is what it is. Just a silly reality show. It's fun to see familiar faces, people I know or people I, know from social media or whatever if I don't know them personally. And, seeing the spots around town in Charleston as well is always fun. It's we kind of forget sometimes that with these reality shows and stuff, it just feels like this thing that happens in Charleston only. And you forget this is going out, all over the country, of course, these shows. And there's big fans of both who don't live in the state. I would venture to say the majority of their fan base is probably from out of state and percentage wise, Like I feel like in South Carolina, the shows get a lot of hate because that's going to happen when a reality show is based in your state or city. But I know lots of people who are super into these shows, and in any event, it's fun to see Charleston, on TV like that in the national spotlight. I know, people might not like that drama that comes with the shows or is that a representation of Charlestonians or what have you. But it is cool to see, businesses and the sites and all that good stuff on TV. It does have reality TV, especially one in the city that you live in, is unique and interesting for several reasons. But it simultaneously will make you feel better about yourself. Like, oh man, I'm glad I don't have that kind of drama in my life. Or, I'm glad that I'm a little bit more put together than so-and-so on the show. But then will also make you feel bad because, it's TV. It's all these beautiful people, super good looking. And you're like, ugh, I don't look anything like that. It has that effect on me. Of course, I'm sure others know what I'm talking about. But just got to remember, it's TV. Of course, they put the really good looking people on there. So in any event, I have been watching that. Whether that's good for my mental health or not, who knows? But it is entertaining to say the least. But that's really it as far as anything interesting going on in my life. Hopefully, I'll have some fun things to talk about. As far as what I'm doing, I'm starting to look into, different events and things. I just haven't really purchased tickets to a lot of shows that have been announced and events and things, but I'm starting to pick up here. So hopefully I'll be able to report back on some fun stuff here pretty soon. But without any further ado, let's get into the news. Mount Pleasant officially passed 2 hate crime ordinances at a town hall meeting that happened last Wednesday night. We talked about this when they first discussed it. They are now officially passed. The first ordinance is called the Hate Intimidation Ordinance, which will add harsher penalties considering factors such as race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, or disability regarding someone who commits a crime. The second ordinance relates to handbills, flyers. It will make it illegal to distribute those items at private residences, except for, newspapers and mail, of course. Those are normal. They're going to be there. But anything outside of that is going to be now against this ordinance. It also adds an increased punishment for violations that involve intimidation or threats. Mount Pleasant leaders began discussing ways to fight back against hate crime after anti-Semitic flyers were passed around neighborhoods in both September and October of last year. Now, violating these ordinances can result in a misdemeanor charge, a fine of up to $500, and or up to 30 days in jail. So you might be wondering, why is Mount Pleasant specifically doing this? Of course, they had the incident, so that's why they are finally trying to do something about hate, but also because the state won't. As we've discussed many times, South Carolina is one of only 2 states in this country that does not have hate crime legislation of any kind on the books. It's been discussed. It never goes through for varying reasons, and I'm sure we'll talk about it again as the push to pass something continues. So that's why Mount Pleasant had a couple incidents that they said this is not appropriate. This is something we need to fight back against and show that this is not acceptable in our community. And since the state won't do anything, we'll do something. So they have those now increased penalties for the aforementioned, if there's any type of discrimination as it relates to committing a crime or handing out flyers that, have racist, bigoted content. And if they include any intimidation or threats along with that, that penalty increases as well. So good on Mount Pleasant getting that passed. Yes, we all know, ordinances, laws are never prevent 100% of crime, but that's not a reason to not have these things on the books. It may deter some people from doing it. So hats off to them. Glad they got it passed, and hopefully this will lead to a push from other cities and towns doing something similar, or pushing the state legislators to actually stop dragging their feet and get this thing passed. I often joke that South Carolina continually leads from behind, and obviously leading is doing some heavy lifting there. It is obviously way behind the times on many, many types of legislations and just moving forward. There was a small little bit of progress at the start of the new year. Tamika Isaac Devine, if you don't know that name, it's okay. She recently just took her oath of office. Actually, this past Tuesday was the day. She is South Carolina's newest senator. And with that, she has now brought the state from having the least number of women in its Senate. So congratulations, South Carolina, not last anymore. The state now has 6 women in its Senate. Again, this is on the state level. Now, it's still a pretty small group, obviously. There's only 6 of them. You may remember the 5 before, and they're all in different parties. They have come across, it's actually 3 different parties included, as Mia McLeod is now an independent. They come together and they call themselves the Sister Senators. Anytime they kind of have to band together against the Good Old Boys Network and try to stand up for women together, which is great that they can cross party lines like that, but it's too bad that they feel like they have to, band together to do what's right because their male counterparts often will not. This whole Sister Senators moniker came to light last year during the fight against abortion restrictions, and they were trying to do their best together to not, after Roe v. Wade was overturned, to not have this extremist legislation pass. Unfortunately, they did not succeed in that goal. And yes, having 6 women in the Senate it's not a lot. It's still not representative of our, demographics at large. You would hope that your legislation matches what the community looks like. So it's still behind, but considering where it was about 10 years ago, this is actually a decent amount of progress. South Carolina, believe it or not, had no women in the Senate until the election of Republican Katrina Shealy in 2012. That's right. There was 0 women in our state Senate until 2012. It's now been a full 11 years, but I mean, really, if we're talking from the date she was elected, it's 12 years, as we're in 2024 now. So 12 years after they elected their first woman to the Senate, we're now up to 6. So progress slowly but surely, as usual. South Carolina is being dragged into the present on many issues. So now with Divine's election, not only are they no longer last in the country, women now make up 13% of the South Carolina Senate, which is up from the previous lowest in the nation rank of 10%. Alabama is now in last place with 11%. West Virginia is at 11.8%, and Louisiana is at 12.8%. So it actually, percentage-wise, is taking it not just out of that last spot, but up a few more, as some other states are obviously doing worse. But again, progress slowly but surely being made. Always good to have a diverse group of people in the politics, in your state legislators, so that you can make sure everybody is equally representative. And, it's not always that there's like nefarious things going on, where certain groups are trying to keep other groups down. Obviously, we know that does happen, but oftentimes, at no fault of their own, there's just a perspective, perhaps, that a certain group may not have because there isn't a representative from a group different from them. So it's always beneficial to have diversity like that. Glad South Carolina is doing better in this category. Still work to do, but slowly but surely we're getting there. Speaking of the legislature, the state house, now the other side of the chamber, is pursuing a pair of bills to require users and content creators to verify their age in order to access social media and adult entertainment websites. Seems, at some levels, this could potentially work and obviously be a good thing, especially as we're talking about adult websites. We don't want anyone under 18 to be able to access those, of course, but there are some free speech concerns that go along with this. And pushback, of course, from media companies, specifically social media, and we'll get to that in a moment. So the two measures, both in the House Judiciary Committee, would create new requirements for pornographic websites and social media platforms to mitigate users under the age of 18, from potentially accessing something that could be harmful. The move comes amid, as I said, a kind of broader national conversation around child safety on the internet. It's not just about accessing things that are meant for adults. We've seen studies of how detrimental social media can be, how a lot of apps and websites and stuff are designed to be addictive, designed to get people to keep coming back, and children are susceptible to that. So this is a broad, the two paths they're trying to go here is very broad, and there are a lot of questions about how we can protect children from both of these types of things. So for adult entertainment websites, the legislation would require that all users provide identification that verifies that they are at least 18 years of age in order to gain access. You may have seen sites, not just adult entertainment sites, but even like alcohol websites and stuff. There'll be like are you 21? You're not supposed to look at an alcohol website if you're not 21, and you just have to check yes or no. So it's not really preventing anything. So that's what this is trying to say. Like there has to be a layer to actually verify instead of just having to check yes or no or what have you. So on the other side, for social media sites, legislation would make it that social media providers would be required to obtain parental consent for all users under the age of 18. It would also subject underage users to very strict privacy and content management settings. So basically, if you have a child, they are under the age of 18, you would have to, as a parent, somehow provide consent. It's unclear exactly how that would work, saying that you're okay with your child being on, say, Facebook or Twitter or TikTok, Instagram, whatever it may be. And also they're going to have, under this legislation, the state would require there to be some really strict privacy and content management settings for those accounts. Now, this proposed legislation includes everything from bans on advertising in underage users' feeds to restrictions on personal data collection. Other suggestions include mandates that would allow parents the option to limit the amount of time their children can spend on a website on any given day. There's similar bills that require age verification on pornographic websites that have passed in other states. There are court challenges to similar legislation enacted in states like Louisiana, Texas, and Utah that have so far been unsuccessful. Now, State Attorney General Alan Wilson spoke on January 11th. It was his testimony on this bill, and he said his office would commit to defending any enacted law in court, saying he believes South Carolina was, quote, primed, end quote, to pass a law of its own. The bill, which proponents says is necessary to mitigate detrimental impacts social media can have on young people's physical and emotional well-being, is, of course, not without its obstacles. One of the biggest obstacles is the websites agreeing to do it. There's pushback from Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram. They're challenging some of these states who have tried to enact these laws. So we'll see where it goes. This is one of those things that on the surface, it certainly seems like a good thing, especially as it relates to adult entertainment websites. We know that you're supposed to be 18 to get on those sites. And anybody under the age of 18, they should not have access to that. That makes sense, of course. We're talking about children and, trying to protect them and things. The social media thing also makes sense, trying to protect them. Are there some aspects that are maybe going too far? Perhaps. I'm not a parent, though, so, it's tough for me to say. I know my perspective on social media would be vastly different if I had a child that was on those sites or wanted to be on those sites. So we'll see where it goes. I need to look more into the legislation, but it's certainly interesting that this has come up, and there didn't really seem to be any signaling that I saw that this was on the horizon. I was probably just out of the loop, and this has been brought up before, but it does appear that this is going to be a priority this legislative session, at least in the House, and we'll see where it goes. And lastly, an update on the Murdaugh situation, not Alec Murdaugh himself. This is actually somewhat old news, but in case you hadn't heard, I wanted to make sure we talked about it on the podcast. You may remember Clerk of Court Becky Hill is facing some ethic complaints that potentially could lead to a retrial. We'll see how that all shakes out, as well as her son, who also worked for Charleston County government, is in trouble for he is under investigation for allegedly wiretapping, spying on employees and hacking, getting information he shouldn't have, basically, are the accusation. So all sorts of drama with that family. And it took another step during the last month of the year. And like I said, just hadn't had a chance to bring it up on the podcast. But Becky Hill wrote a book. A lot of the ethics complaints revolves around the accusation that she did things inappropriately while clerk of court because she was trying to get this book out and make money and blah, blah, blah. So if she was trying to make money out of this book, she took a big hit because the book is now off shelves. And this is why. Neil Gordon, who is the co-author of the book, which is called Behind the Doors of Justice, The Murdaugh Murders, he announced that the book has been unpublished and sales have been stopped due to revelations that Becky Hill plagiarized a portion of the book without Gordon's knowledge. Gordon says he discovered the plagiarism while he was reviewing some of Hill's emails that were released through the Freedom of Information Act, and that's when he made this discovery. A lot of Becky Hill's emails came out as they're going through the discovery process, and she's eventually going to have her day in court, and they were trying to see if these allegations against her were true. Well, an unintended consequence of those emails was her co-author looking at them and realizing she plagiarized. He said he discovered an email exchange between Hill and a BBC reporter in which the reporter shared a passage from an upcoming article about the Murdaugh trial with Hill. When Gordon compared the email from the BBC reporter with a 12-page portion of the preface to the book, which Hill claimed to have written herself, he realized that Hill had plagiarized the reporter's words. So he went on to say that when he confronted her about it, she admitted that she plagiarized the passage. She chalked it up to being under deadline pressures, and that was her explanation for it. And so Gordon, who is actually a journalist himself, you sometimes don't realize these books are written with a journalist that you would see in a newspaper or magazine because of we're talking about other people. We're talking about a trial. You want to make sure you get all the information right. And, someone who doesn't have that background may not know what is and what is not okay to put in these types of books. So she had his help. And unfortunately, this, went through. He had no idea, of course, because it was in a private email that he was not included on. So because of that, he said he cannot excuse her behavior, nor can he condone it. And that is why the book is no longer being sold. He also notified the BBC reporter about Hill's actions and said he was told that the BBC's attorneys are investigating. So things could get even worse for Becky Hill. Not a good look at all, regardless of if there are actually any actions that influence the jury in any way, as some of the accusations are. We'll see, but not good that she rushed out this book and obviously plagiarized. That's the worst part about rushing out that book. So, like I said, just wanted to share that news. You may have already seen it, but since we talk about the trial and now this whole Becky Hill spinoff from the trial, I wanted to make sure you all had that information in case you did miss it over the holiday break. That'll do it for Holy City Center Radio. I hope you have an amazing week. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Sound System for producing this and every episode of Holy City Center Radio. Thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every show as well. If you have a moment, please rate, review, subscribe, all those good things that you can do on your streaming platform for this podcast. Please do so. You can also vote for Holy City Center and the Best of Charleston Awards. Link is in the show notes for that. And lastly, you can go to patreon.com/Holy City Center if you want to support in that manner. I will be back on Wednesday. Can't wait to be back with you. Until then, though, good night and good luck.